Estás viendo Canal América, televisión dominicana para el mundo.
A Time for True show is sponsored by the Office of Dr. Bernard Fialkoff, a periodontal, dental implant and laser specialist in New York City, for over 40 years. Dr. Fialkoff was honored by the International College of Dentists and Pierre Fauchard, and received the Presidential Lifetime Humanitarian Honor from the White House. Call us at 718-229-3838.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Yeah. You try to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your fears.
Welcome to A Time for True show. It's a pleasure to have you back with us again, and I'm your host, Dr. Bernard Fialkoff, and today is a very special day because I celebrated my 70th birthday. And as I did that, I thought, well, what kind of show should we have tomorrow? As a periodontal and dental implant surgeon of 43 years in New York City, and the president of a nonprofit drug education program, the Foundation for a Drug-Free World, the Americas chapter, I thought it was important to address something that's besetting and affecting so many people, not only in our country and New York metro area, but the world. I've been preparing for a special opioid, what's called MATE training, that was mandated by the DEA that I'm going to be giving to the San Fernando Valley Dental Association, approved by the California Board of Dentistry. And as I put the presentation in its final touches, what becomes obvious is the harm and the danger of these drugs that we're facing today, and the interactions of these drugs, whether they be pharmaceutical or illicit or combinations, which is very common nowadays, and the addiction, and the tolerance, and the death, and the loss of our loved ones. And if you look at some figures, in the last 3 years, we've lost first 107,000 Americans, then 109,000 Americans, and then 2023, 112,000 Americans to death of illicit drugs, compared to a 10-year Vietnam War of 58,000. If we multiplied 112,000 by 10 years, you would have about 1,112,000 deaths as compared to the 10-year war of 58,000. We have an invisible war, a dangerous war, destroying our country, destroying our families. And as a dentist, I'm going to show you some pictures that are going to be graphic. They're going to be a little difficult to look at. But we have to realize that if the effects of these drugs just on the oral cavity in the mouth are what you're going to see, I want those of you watching out there to realize the harm that it's causing in the entire body, and why we have violence, and why we have some of the social unrest that we have when we have people affected so adversely. Engineer, if you will, let's put on the first image, and we'll start with something that's been legalized in so much of the country, marijuana. And it's been made to seem innocuous when the reality is that it's not. In pregnant women who smoke marijuana, their kids are born psychotic, neurotic at best, experience attention problems. I think there's enough attention deficit diagnoses without accumulating more from women who use marijuana during their pregnancies. And also the marijuana affects the heart, affects the respiratory system. And here, let's take a look intraorally at what you're seeing. As a periodontal surgeon, I see many of these effects. I've seen it in very young people who didn't heal properly from normal surgeries that I do and perform for the last 40-something years, yet they didn't heal. Why? Because the marijuana caused a negative pressure, caused a vasoconstriction, which means a constriction of the blood vessels, a decrease in the blood supply to the mouth, and there you can see the effects. You can see the dryness of the mouth. You can see the tremendous amount of recession that occurs within that person who smokes marijuana. You see the accumulation of tartar, which are little stony deposits which can be white, gray, brown, black. And there you see them in this situation. You also, from the dryness, you get bacterial accumulation, which we call plaque. And this plaque, along with the marijuana, causes caries. These caries are what routinely are called cavities. And you end up having cavities, gum disease, and more ominously, you can develop white patches, which are called leukoplakia, red patches, and have an increased risk of developing intraoral cancer. When you look at all these factors, really you have to think twice about marijuana. For those of you who have veneers, who are young, who did orthodontics to get beautiful looking teeth, look at what happens in a short time with this habit. Again, this is just the oral visual effect that you're seeing. So imagine what that loss of vascularity and blood supply means in your body. What it means to your sexual activity, because it affects your reproductive potential. There are many, many studies from the NIH and the CDC showing that marijuana is not innocuous. It's not natural. It's not organic. In fact, the NIH and CDC have found it to be a gateway drug to opioids. Let's go on to the next drug engineer. We'll go on to the next slide, and we'll continue as we explain to you. Cocaine is still being used. Cocaine is a stimulant. And cocaine, unfortunately, causes severe ulcerations. And those ulcerations can lead to destruction of bone, of gum tissues, of skin. When you look at this man, it's a horrific slide, but this is one of the effects of severe cocaine use. What's happened is the nasal septum and the bony joints and form of the nasal structures dissipate and disappear, and the person's nose collapses into their face from using the cocaine in the nose and putting it in their nose. If they put it in their mouth, the same occurs within their mouth. Results in gum recession and perforations. And let me show you the next picture so you can see this. Engineer, let's go to the next slide. This one explaining to you the cocaine causes tooth and gum destruction, decay. You lose teeth. Obviously, as your nose is destroyed, you lose your perception of smell, which is a wonderful sensation, which is associated with eating and a much pleasure in life. It's lost to the cocaine. The septum perforates, the nose collapses. There's a loss of taste. Let's go on to the next slide. Here, not only did it destroy the nose, but look at the destruction as it causes a nasal oral perforation, a communication from the mouth into the nose from the use of cocaine. You see the loss of the teeth. You see the decay on the blackened tooth. You see the recession as the teeth have developed gum disease. But you can imagine how lost this person is, that even though they had a hole in their mouth, an oral nasal perforation from the cocaine, they were so addicted that their addiction took total control of any logic or wish to survive. Horrific. Let's go on to the next slide, engineer. Now let's look at something that's very commonplace, but in today's climate, with all these other drugs on the market, the opioids, the amphetamines, people who are depressed on psychotropic drugs, the interactions, now you add alcohol, and you get a time bomb. Let's just go back now and look intraorally and look at the effects that we see as dentists. And alcohol, as do all these other illicit substances and drugs, cause dry mouth, which we call xerostomia. The saliva has antibodies. The saliva buffers the acid in your mouth and causes a normal pH, which is healthy for your gum, for your intraoral skin tissue, which is called mucosa, for the tongue. But when you dry out from xerostomia intraorally, you get tooth decay from the plaque adherence, you get recession, you get ulceration of the mucosal tissues, the cheek lining of the tongue. It can become very red and shiny from the dryness. And you have to realize that alcohol, unfortunately, aside from acidic, also many times is combined with other sugary liquids. And so all this tremendous sugar leads to tremendous tooth decay. Something even more important is that it leads to cancer, increasing your risk when that smoking is present and decreasing your expected life expectancy. As I go through these and you look at this, I want you to look and say, is it worth it? Realize that many studies from the NIH, from the CDC, from different scientific journals have shown that a healthy lifestyle, exercise, spiritual activity, a nutritious diet with less sugar, less refined foods, more fruits, vegetables, organic proteins, leads to release of the body's normal high hormones. The body has normal hormones which make us happy, which are released. And it's interesting how nature has correlated with this good feeling that will happen naturally with good activities, the exercise, the nutrition, the social activities, the productivity, and avoiding the stresses. Instead, being more humane, more spiritual, more inclined to care. And it's interesting how you get that back, how you give comes back to you as your own body makes you high naturally. They're called endorphins, also dopamine, also serotonin. All of these factors are released naturally from these positive activities. Let's go on, engineer, to the next slide. So we're looking at alcohol. Here you see alcohol causing severe gum disease. Those little balls of gray, brown, those are tartar deposits. And you say, how could that person let themselves go? We have to realize that they're addicted. They're getting high. But when they're getting high, when they're addicted, they don't realize. They're not aware. They're not conscious. They're losing their consciousness. And this is why the addiction takes over. Their logic, their presence disappears. They get a little bit like stonied or not quite there. Or, and you see them, and when you see them, you feel bad because you realize they're in a delusion and that they're losing their lives. Let's go on to the next slide. And let's go on now to something that's very overlooked, that's not even looked at sometimes as a problem anymore because so many more severe problems. But tobacco actually has caused tremendous number of deaths. Tobacco caused more deaths than COVID total. Every year, tobacco causes over 400,000 American deaths. Very, very high. Higher than illicit drugs. And you get 3 times more gum disease from tobacco smoking than you do if you don't. So for those of you out there who say, wow, I want to keep my teeth. I want a healthy mouth. I want to have a nice smile. I don't want to have the recession I'm seeing on the screen. Don't smoke. Smoking causes tremendous amount of periodontal problems that I see in my office continually. I have so many patients who come in who lose their teeth, end up needing very expensive implants. Implants are a miracle. They're beautiful. They work. We do unbelievable things. But it's healthier, cheaper, less invasive, never to need an implant. And imagine the same person, the one who smokes and the one who doesn't. The one who doesn't does 3 times better with the same exact treatment and avoids all these negative consequences. Obviously also, smoking leads to cancer, leads to addiction to the nicotine, and worse, when you combine the smoking with the alcohol abuse, you get even more altered effects, more chance for carcinogenic cancer changes, more intraoral changes, more decay, more oral destruction. But realize that while this is going on, the effects on your mind, the effects on your human physiology as your body starts breaking down as you've seen. Realize that what you're seeing in the mouth is an indicator of what's going on in your entire system overall. Is it really worth it? I don't think so. Let's go on to the next image, engineer. And now we'll take a look at what we call ice or crystal meth, amphetamines. Amphetamines are stimulants. They cause you tremendous euphoria. They definitely stimulate you. and you start losing yourself. Something very important to realize, there is no drug or chemical treatment to rehabilitate amphetamine use. The same with cocaine. So those are addictions that you're going to have to go cold turkey with no aid, go through severe symptoms. So I say to you, are those drugs worth the pain, the suffering that you would go through to rehabilitate? Or if you couldn't rehabilitate, are they really so necessary that you'll risk your life and possibly die over time from the use of this amphetamine? In the mouth, there's something called met mouth. Why is it called met mouth? Because it just destroys the mouth. Looks like a bomb went off and that the teeth shattered. Because the amphetamine is very acidic, and the acid with the dry mouth that all the drugs cause tremendous resorption of the teeth, as you see there in front of you. This is not an exaggeration. The acid also destroys the gum tissues. You can imagine how uncomfortable this person is when they're eating. Just looking at the pictures are horrific enough, but the fact that we have so many Americans using amphetamines, and that amphetamines and the opioids are very prevalent in use in our country in 2023, 24, in recent times. In fact, the amphetamines have been laced with the opioids, and the opioids most ominously being fentanyl. So it's very important to control this. And here you see the destructive effects of this amphetamine, this ice. This stimulation also causes jaw clenching and jaw grinding, putting tremendous force on the teeth, leading the teeth to crack and fracture, and to see this picture that you're seeing on the screen. Now let's go on, Buddha, to the next slide, and we'll put on Ecstasy. MDMA, much stronger than just the amphetamine. Now the ecstasy, which causes tremendous stimulation, supposedly sexual arousal, but at what price again that you've seen? In this case, it causes tremendous grinding, clenching, and affects your personality in a way of really hostility, of a feeling of uncontrolled energy. And, you know, again, in recent times, people thought they were just taking ecstasy that was actually laced with opioids or fentanyl, which is a very severe opioid. Got unbelievable highs, but at what price? Look at how many deaths have occurred. Look at the pictures that I'm showing you. Realize that ecstasy also causes dry mouth. But the pictures I've shown up to this point are horrific enough that I wanted not to have any more shocking photos. I think it's evident why we should avoid illicit drugs and look to other ways of feeling positive, of feeling good. Let's go on to the next slide, please, engineer, and we'll see something else that we see in the mouth. We see this tremendous decay, this loss of teeth, a person who really doesn't seem like they're all there. Very common heroin use, or what people call smack. The heroin, the smack causes tremendous craving for sweet foods, and along with a dry mouth again that this drug also causes, what happens? You get tooth decay. Tooth decay leads to pain. The tooth can't be salvaged, has to be extracted. Sometimes the teeth fall out on their own. Tremendous pain. And you can see the horrific situation of this person. Let's go on to the next slide, engineer. So as we're waiting for the next slide, I ask you, is it worth it? Here's the last. Opioids. Opioids, as opposed to the stimulant effect of cocaine and amphetamine, opioids are more of a downer. But people tend to combine them nowadays. They want the upper with a downer, and it's the hip thing to do. So the opioids lead you to be not there. When you go down, when you get sedated, because you may be too anxious or whatever it is you're running away from, so you start losing contact with reality. You don't brush, you don't take care of yourself, you don't bathe, you don't keep your doctor visits, you don't do your checkups to maintain your health. In the mouth, you see a tremendous decay and gum disease, bad breath. You know, your spouse, your partner don't want to be with you. You're losing your life relationships. You're losing your touch with reality. You're losing really not only what you're seeing intraorally with gum disease, decay, cancer, but the entire body is being affected and addicted. Horrific. The dry mouth also can lead to effects within the esophagus, the throat, causing dryness, causing other problems. So with this last picture here, what I want to do is urge you, if you're on drugs, try to get into a better environment. Exercise, walk at night, eat nutritious food, take vitamins. There are programs in the world. One that I run is educational called Drug Free World. Another one, which is a tremendous drug rehabilitation program, is called Narconon International, all over the globe. Keep your relationships. The Surgeon General of the United States recently came out with an advisory on the epidemic of loneliness and isolation in our country. And in that advisory, the top physician of the country, our Surgeon General, said scientific studies have shown that the lack of socialization, the lack of human interaction has led to our problems. That led to more physical and mental diseases, more community problems. And the Surgeon General himself has urged us to be more related, more in touch with each other, not on phones, not on apps, but live and in person, and caring for each other and giving that source of humanity, which I want to end this show on. If you're having dental problems, feel free to call on me. Feel free to call on your dentist, your physician. See your loved ones. Turn your life around. You have all it takes to do that. You can do it. I urge you to do so. It's never too late. There's always tomorrow. I hope this show will make an impact and help many people. I myself are 70. I want to see all those young people who are out there to live well beyond and have happy, productive, prosperous lives. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode of A Time for Truth show.
This show was sponsored by A Time for Truth Foundation Incorporated as a community service.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything was falling apart. Yeah. You tried to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your feet